your diet might be absolutely destroying your health, which is why today we're going to look at my followers' diets and their full day of eatings so we can get some proper inspiration. So first off, we got this guy who unfortunately texted me in German because most of my followers are German, but of course I'm still gonna translate it for you. So for breakfast he had 2 oranges and 750 milliliters of water. Then for lunch he had 250 grams of rare wild boar stew meat, and then in the evening he had 1 liter of raw milk kefir, 200 grams of beef liver, and 5 raw eggs. So it's good that he's hydrating in the morning. I'm a fan of that, but obviously the oranges aren't optimal because he's living in Germany and there are no oranges growing there, especially in winter. So the rare wild boar is of course very good, although it's a very small meal. I mean, stew meat is usually very lean, but still very good. Then 1 liter of raw milk kefir, 200 grams beef liver, 5 raw eggs is basically perfect. So overall, the foods he ate are of course great, but he's not really having a lot of food at all. Maybe he's a bit younger or he's trying to lose weight, and he's especially not having an adequate amount of fat. I'd recommend to add just some fat, especially because the wild boar stew meat is very lean. So the next person also texted me in German, and it's a very long language, so this is gonna be a lot of work. So right after waking up, he had some water with lemon juice and apple cider vinegar. So the water with lemon juice is good to hydrate, of course, but I definitely avoid the apple cider vinegar because it's just way too acidic for your gullet. And everyone knows that apple cider vinegar just tastes way too sour, like you literally can't drink it with a straight face. So I just listen to your instincts and don't drink that. So for breakfast, he had 5 eggs, which is obviously great. We love eggs around here. So then he also had some carrots, which I'm obviously not a fan of. Of course, they are one of the better vegetables, but they don't occur like that in nature. Like you wouldn't even be able to eat one wild carrot, right? Then he had an apple and a kiwi, which is like okay. I mean, they obviously don't grow around here in winter, especially kiwis, because kiwis are also one of the more worse fruits. They are more acidic and contain more oxalates than other fruits. And just think about it, you couldn't eat that many kiwis, right? Then he had 2 teaspoons of psyllium husks. Psyllium husks are basically just a fiber bomb. They're a complete scam. They're actually worth an own video because so many influencers preach about them, although they're just a complete scam. He also had a slice of sourdough bread, organic sourdough bread with butter. Now the butter is good, but the sourdough bread, obviously, sourdough bread is going to be lower in gluten and anti-nutrients, but it still contains a significant amount of gluten and anti-nutrients, which is why I would never recommend eating it. Then, as a snack, he had some skyr with honey, walnuts, almonds, sunflower seeds, and dates. So skyr is obviously going to be pasteurized, so I'd recommend swapping that out with some raw yogurt or some raw milk instead. Raw honey is good as long as it's seasonal and pesticide free, but of course, again, in winter your body is not gonna be primed to metabolize fructose. The same obviously goes for the dates, but the seeds and the nuts are a way bigger problem because they are gonna be very high in anti-nutrients like phytates, lectins, oxalates, goitrogens, which are just gonna mess up your gut and prevent mineral absorption. For dinner, he had some chili con carne, which is like this recipe with ground beef and kidney beans, and he has that with either rice, potatoes, or sourdough bread. So the ground beef is obviously good, although it's gonna be overcooked usually in these kinds of recipes, but the kidney beans are definitely a problem. They are very high in lectins, which is why you fart usually every time after you eat them. I'd also avoid the rice because rice is going to be high in arsenic, which is a toxic heavy metal, and it also contains high amounts of phytic acid, which is going to prevent mineral absorption. So if you're going to have a carb source with it, then potatoes are going to be the better option, although they're of course not optimal. Now this is where it's getting problematic because he's having a salad which contains spinach, lettuce, tomatoes, cucumbers, olive oil, and apple cider vinegar. Because spinach is usually super high in oxalates, like we're talking 800 milligrams per one serving, which can easily cause kidney stones. And then the lettuce is also usually going to be high in oxalates and goitrogens. So the tomatoes and cucumber is fine, just some low carbohydrate fruit, pretty good for hydration. And then olive oil has to be like super high quality, and even then it's going to be not optimal because it's just too high in linoleic acid. So pre-workout he's having some beetroot juice, which is very high in oxalates, so I'd generally avoid that. And before sleep he's having some 90% dark chocolate, which is problematic, especially before sleep, because dark chocolate is very high in caffeine and theobromine, which triggers your nervous system, which is gonna basically make you more alert, which is gonna harm your sleep. He also consumes one probiotic a day, which is good. He says that he's having like kefir or sauerkraut or something like that. Obviously, the kefir is gonna be better than those fermented vegetables because it's not gonna have that super high salt content. Now, I want to comment on the supplements because usually for 99% of all supplements, they're going to use some harsh chemicals like acetol or hexane to derive them. And this also goes for vitamin D supplements. And another problem with vitamin D supplements is that it's not going to be sulfurized. So it basically just skips the step where it becomes water soluble. And usually, when you get vitamin D from the sun, it's going to become sulfurized, it's going to become water soluble. And when you just skip that step, your body won't be able to use that efficiently, right? He's also taking creatine, which is a petroleum derived substance, and black seed oil, which is just a toxic seed oil. I already made a video about that on TikTok. So, overall, this diet needs a lot of work. Now, this guy actually sent me a video of what he eats in a day, so we're gonna react to that.
For breakfast, I had 5 raw eggs and about 700 milliliters of raw milk.
So 5 raw eggs and 700 milliliters of raw milk. That's completely optimal. Like, what can I say? Especially at, I don't know how old he is. I think like 16. So raw milk, especially great for that age for development.
For lunch, I had 300 grams of met, which is just ground pork. Dinner, I had some clabbered milk. This
Ooh, met. I love ground pork. It actually tastes way better than beef. It's also the best source of thiamine, so vitamin B1 out there. Actually by far. And also when I eat it, it feels a little bit lighter to digest than beef. So yeah, that's great. So clabbered milk is great. It's gonna be low in lactose. It's gonna be easier to digest, and personally I drink a lot of it, although I'm currently not drinking it actually, but I usually drink a lot of it. Now, I don't think you can actually call that a tartar, but of course that doesn't matter. It's just some man-made name. He's just having some raw ground beef with some probably raw cheese, which is perfect, especially if it's unsalted cheese, of course. Now, the döner, the kebab, is obviously not good for him. It's just some bread with overcooked meat, some green leaves in there, vegetables, and some seed oil sauce. But yeah, he knows that, of course. But the 3 raw eggs are obviously great. So overall, great diet, besides, of course, the kebab. Now, this guy, Raw Username, also sent me a video, and I know he's into like the Primal diet a lot, so I'm gonna expect some great stuff from him. So at first he's having some fermented raw milk, raw bone marrow, and raw eggs, which is just optimal. I can't say anything against that, it's just optimal. And then he also had some leftover milk that looks pretty clever. And then he had some liver, heart, sauerkraut, raw butter, and cooked chicken, liver, heart, raw butter, obviously perfect. Then sauerkraut is gonna be high in salt, whatever. And cooked chicken is still good, even though it's cooked, and it also doesn't look overcooked. Like, it looks like it could be pretty rare inside, and obviously it tastes amazing. Then he also made some nut formula. Well, I don't know much about all these formulas, so I can't say much about that. But it's good that he picked those out of a garden. So yeah, great diet, mostly raw animal foods, just like you wish it to be. Now this guy had 1 liter of raw milk, which is great, obviously. Then he had 250 grams of cooked beef, it's good, but raw beef would be better, and 180 grams of potatoes. Potatoes are one of the better vegetables and carb sources, but again, they're still pretty high in oxalates and lectins, so if you're gonna eat them, at least take the skin off. He's also having one little fruit like an apple or an orange, which is okay. It's just one little fruit. It's not gonna be that much fructose. Then he's having some cooked beef and potatoes. Again, we already went over that. And then 300 grams of pasteurized yogurt. It's pasteurized dairy. Obviously, raw dairy would be way better. So I'd recommend him to swap that out for some raw kefir or some raw yogurt. So this diet obviously still needs a little work, but if you just make some small switches here and there, you're gonna be really, really great. So this guy sent me a photo of everything he ate in a day, and he's starting off with some that looks like dry aged meat. Just fresh meat would be better, because when you dry the meat, it's gonna lower the mineral content and water soluble vitamin content, because you're taking out all of the water, but it's still pretty good. Then he also made some tartare, which looks delicious, but that could be pork or fish. Anyway, that's really, really good. And he's also having a glass of milk on the side, so that's a really good meal. Then he's having some raw milk again, which is good. Then he's having some tartare again. He actually texted me and told me that the first one was beef, but this one is chicken, and it also looks really good. And yeah, that's amazing, just raw meat and egg yolk. That's perfect. Then he's having some raw milk, well, actually a lot of raw milk and some raw honey. I wouldn't necessarily eat the raw honey, because the raw milk already has a lot of lactose. So if you're gonna drink that much milk, you don't really need any extra carbs. So he actually sent me a message and told me that he drank 6 liters of raw milk on that day, which, if you're in puberty and you want to grow and develop, well, you can do that. But if you're an adult, or you're like 30 years old, I wouldn't recommend it. But, you can do that. So the next diet we're reviewing is actually from the person who I bought this hoodie from. So let's go. So it's German again, so I'm gonna have to translate that. He had some sourdough bread with raw honey. I already went over that. I'd avoid sourdough bread. It's just grain sludge, and raw honey is fine seasonally. Then he had 3 scrambled eggs, which is good. If you're gonna cook your eggs, I'd rather recommend you to eat them sunny side up, so that the egg yolk will be preserved. But it's still good. It's still eggs. And he also had 400 milliliters of raw milk kefir, which is very, very good for him. For lunch, he's having a whole rump steak, which is great, but he's also having some rice, which is high in arsenic, and some beetroot, which contains high levels of oxalates. So I'd swap those two out for some raw butter or some raw bone marrow, just some fat source, because rump steak is pretty lean actually. So for dinner he had 3 scrambled eggs. Again, we already went over that. Then he had some whole milk yogurt. I'd rather recommend him to have some raw milk kefir, again, like he had for breakfast, but it's fine. Then he also had some wild blueberries, which are pretty good. Obviously, it's not seasonal, so it's not going to be optimal, but they are lower in fructose than other fruits, of course. Then he also had some nuts, which you should probably avoid because of the high amounts of lectins, phytic acids, and oxalates, like we already went over that, and some raw honey. I honestly feel like I'm just repeating myself over and over again, but for a snack, he had a kiwi, which is higher in oxalates than other fruits, and it's not seasonal and locally, so I wouldn't eat that. And a protein bar, he already said that it was a cheat meal, so he knows that that's not good for him. And some cappuccino with whole milk. Coffee is very high in caffeine and theobromine. That's gonna spike your cortisol and decrease your sleep quality. But the whole milk, or maybe it's raw milk actually, then I just recommend you to drink just the milk instead. Now this is the last full day of eating we're gonna review today. For breakfast he had 1 liter of raw milk, which is great. You know, you want to hydrate in the morning, and raw milk is perfect for that. And he's also having 1 glass of spring water, which is great as well. But if you're gonna drink 1 liter of raw milk, that's just unnecessary. I mean, if I did that, I just feel really, really full. Then he had some green tea with a whole lemon. Again, even more fluid. I don't know how all that fits in your stomach, and why would you eat hot water mixed with some green leaves? I don't get that. He's also having some buckwheat with low-fat yogurt and fruits and cinnamon on top. So buckwheat is obviously just a grain that's going to be really high in phytic acid, which again prevents mineral absorption. It's a lot of fruits, you know, a lot of fructose. I don't know in what country he's in, but if he's in some Northern Europe or Central Europe country, that's gonna be way too high in fructose for the current season, which is winter. And then cinnamon is just toxic tree bark. I wouldn't eat that. Then for lunch, he's having sweet potatoes with fish. Fish is obviously great, really high in DHA, and sweet potatoes are basically just very, very similar to potatoes. Again, one of the better vegetables, but still not close to optimal, of course. He had some homemade ketchup with only salt and tomatoes, which is fine. You know, I'm not that big of a fan of salt, but it's way better than some store-bought ketchup, of course. Then he had some vegetables like carrots, red bell pepper. Red bell pepper is a fruit. A glass of beetroot juice. Again, all of these people are drinking beetroot juice for some reason. Um, Carrots, I'm not a fan of. Again, a man-made vegetable. Beetroot juice, very high in oxalates. Red bell peppers are okay. You know, it's just a low carbohydrate fruit, but it's pretty high in lectins, so definitely not optimal. Then again, some hibiscus tea. This guy drinks a lot of tea, and hibiscus tea, that's basically just hot water with some flowers in it. And then for his last meal, he has some purple potatoes. I've tried those actually, they taste really good, but they're just like other potatoes. We already went over those plenty of times. Eggs and fish, really, really good actually. Eggs and fish, I'm a big fan of that. And he's having some tea again, and it's ginger tea. And ginger is actually very, very toxic. It's actually an antibiotic, I think so. And no, ginger does not boost your so-called immune system. Of course, there's not actually an immune system, but that's a different topic. Just listen to your instincts. Ginger is very, very spicy, and no one likes to eat it. So this is of course a really, really high carb diet, which is, especially in winter, far from optimal, and it's gonna cause a lot of issues. But he mentioned that he's doing bodybuilding, which is of course another issue. But if you're doing bodybuilding, you do have a higher need for carbs. But it's of course still healthier than like the regular bodybuilding diet, which just consists of oatmeal and some whey protein and whatnot. So it's still good that he's trying to eat like somewhat healthy, although he's doing bodybuilding. So that's it for today. If you enjoyed this video, or if you learned something today, then you can subscribe and like the video. And yeah, we'll see each other next time.